各位线上的观众朋友，大家午安，欢迎收看疫后市场学线上研讨会，我是外贸协会陈玉如。我们今天研讨会的主题是以色列如何以创新科技面对全球的挑战。在活动开始之前，欢迎大家帮我们按赞、订阅、分享贸协 YouTube 频道，并且帮我们开启小铃铛。8月和9月份，外贸协会还会有一系列的疫后市场学线上研讨会，内容相当的精彩，千万不要错过了。在研讨会开始之前，我们首先有请外贸协会黄志芳董事长为我们致辞，有请黄董事长。
各位线上的企业界先进，大家午安，大家好，欢迎各位参加外贸协会举办的疫后市场学线上研讨会。今年的新冠肺炎疫情彻底改变了未来世界的样貌，影响了全球的经济跟政治，甚至我们的生活跟工作形态都回不去了。后疫情的世界，全球局势必定会重新洗牌。为了协助台湾业者及早做好准备，迎接全新的机会跟挑战，外贸协会从8月开始规划一系列的疫后市场学线上研讨会，每周四下午针对不同的产业，邀请世界各地重量级的讲师上线，介绍当地疫后需求，让各位掌握第一手的商机。在疫情期间，以色列当局抗疫得当，反应非常迅速。除了长期处于危机状态下的准备之外，以色列长久以来累积的深厚科技能量，让他们能够异军突起。尤其未来科技发展基础的人工智慧，以色列在全球评比中仅次于美国及中国，排名第3，提供了征服新冠病毒以及对抗未来未知挑战的利器。所以，外贸协会这次邀请了来自3个以色列创新科技领域知名单位的专家，有帮以色列打响新创大国名号的 Start-Up Nation Central， 还有以色列最大的创投基金 Pitango， 还有可为手机、平板电脑以及其他物联网等边缘装置提供资料中心及计算效能的 AI 晶片新创公司Hailo。从以色列优势科技领域到实际的应用，他们将为大家深入剖析以色列如何以科技对抗本次战役。这是讲师之一的Hailo已经成功与鸿海合作，携手为市场带来具备高竞争力的 AI 应用服务。以色列擅长从0到1，台湾则擅长从1把它变成无数。所以未来如果我们能够加强以产业创新合作，可以带来相辅相成的双赢效果。外贸协会2019年在特拉维夫设置了台湾贸易及创新中心，就是要成为台湾厂商在以色列的眼睛、耳朵以及雷达天线，媒合以色列的创新科技跟台湾的制造实力，带动台湾产业转型。各位厂商若有任何新技术需求，或是想要解决的痛点，我们都会协助筛选合适的解决方案，全力的来协助台湾跟以色列的产业合作。那我们希望借由8月起到9月的疫后市场学这一系列的线上研讨会，能够让各位发掘新的商机，在疫情趋缓后可以抢占先机，开创经济新南海。最后，我要敬祝大家平安健康，事业顺利，谢谢。
2020年，全球面对疫情的影响，各产业皆面临了不同的挑战。以色列是如何以它创新的能量来面对这场战役呢？我们今天非常荣幸邀请到3位以色列重量级的讲师来给我们分享。第一位讲师是以色列新创推广机构 Start-Up Nation策略合伙人 Mr. Eliran Elimelech， 以及当地最大创投 Pitango 策略伙伴主管 Miss Ayelet Tako。最后是 AI 晶片新创公司 Hailo 商务开发副总经理 Mr. Liran。这3位讲师将为我们分享以色列如何以创新科技面对并接受这样子全球的挑战。各位如果有任何问题的话，也欢迎点击影片下方的连结，我们最后会由3位讲师来为大家进行解答。首先，我们欢迎第一位讲师， 以色列新创推广机构 Start-Up Nation 策略合伙人 Mr. Eliran Elimelech 介绍以色列新创生态圈。Welcome, Mr. Elimelech.
大家好，我可以说一点点中文，因为我的中文是不太好。Nice to meet you all, and thank you very much for having me here together with you to introduce you for the next 25 minutes the Israeli startup ecosystem. I will introduce myself and our organization in a minute, but before we will start the presentation, if you don't mind, I would like to share with you a very important secret. And I'm just asking you please to keep the secret for you and not to share it with anyone else. Next slide, please. The secret is that even though we are doing lots of noises in many places all over the world, Israel is a very, 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 very small place. We are less than 9 million people all in all. And if you want to drive from the northest point to the southest point, it will take you less than 8 hours of driving. So in a way, we are very similar in terms of size and in terms of population to Taiwan. It's important to understand that here in Israel, one of the main growth engine of the Israeli GDP is the high-tech sector. The high-tech sector actually contributes a lot to the Israeli GDP and to the Israeli export, as you will see in a minute. And this is what we as an organization are trying to do. Our main target, our main aim of collaborations with global geographies is mainly to strengthen the Israeli ecosystem. Next slide, please. It's important to say that a very small group of people in Israel contributes more than 13% to the Israeli GDP. We call them the high-tech sector in Israel. But generally speaking, it is a group of less than 300,000 employees, which are relatively 7.5% of the total working force, according to the OECD standards. And this group of 300,000 employees only contributes, as I mentioned, 13% to the Israeli GDP and 46% of the total annual Israeli export globally. And this is what we as an organization are trying to do, which is mainly to strengthen this group of people in this sector and make sure that they are continue to be one of the main growth engine of the Israeli economy. Next slide, please. Startup Nation Central is a non-for-profit and non-for-revenue organization. We have about 75 employees. We have offices in Tel Aviv and also in Jerusalem. We are 100% supported by philanthropists. We are an NGO. And all these parameters which I've just mentioned are bringing us the opportunity to be agnostic as possible and support every element as we see it as an important. Whenever it serves our main target, which is again strengthen Israeli high-tech sector in Israeli economy. Next slide, please. We started our organization actually from a book. The book Startup Nation was published about 10 years ago. It was translated to many languages, among of them Mandarin and traditional Mandarin as well. And this is actually a book who describes what are the key main secret sauces of the Israeli entrepreneurial spirit and how this bring Israel as a country and as economy to be one of the key innovative ecosystems in the world. What I'm going to do in the next presentation is to share with you a bit of an information about this ecosystem, what are the ingredients of this ecosystem, what are the challenges that we are facing right now, and I will elaborate a bit more on why and how I see the importance of collaboration with Taiwanese companies in this regard. Next slide, please. Before I start a bit about myself, my name is Eliran Elimelech. I'm working in Startup Nation Central as the Strategic Partnerships Director. I'm responsible for all the collaboration with multinationals and global corporates who are coming to SNC and to Israel to search for innovation. In my background, I used to work many years in the Israeli Ministry of Economy. 4 years of them I served in China as the commercial attaché of the Israeli embassy in Beijing. So this is why I speak a bit of Chinese. In between, I had the pleasure to do several private businesses in the fields of healthcare with ASEAN countries. And I had the opportunity to live something like 40 days in Taiwan. It was in Hsinchu. And I fell in love with your country, with your people, with your food. I have so many good memories from there. And I strongly recommended everyone who I'm meeting to visit Taiwan one day whenever you can. So this is a bit about my background. I'm diving in quickly now to the main elements of the presentation. Next slide, please. So I will start with something which is very interesting. You see here a number in the slide which is saying that there is one startup for every 1,500 people in this country. This country has the highest density of startups in the world, more than the Silicon Valley and more than any other ecosystems in the world. It's not a joke, but here, if you will ask a young child in Israel, what would you like to be when you will be a grown-up person? He will tell you, first, I want to be most likely a pilot. Second, I would like to be a basketball or a football player. And third, I want to be a CEO of an Israeli startup. And this is not a joke. Every day in the news, in the radio, we are hearing about new invention, a new entrepreneur who is becoming to be a very rich person due to a very interesting commercial deal. And you can feel, you can smell, you can see innovation almost in every corner in Israel, not only in the, let's say, the biggest cities, but also in the peripheral areas. You go abroad and you will ask young kids and young people, and they all say you that innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship is definitely among them. Next slide, please. If you're looking about the Global Innovation Index, which is a very promising index, which published by the Global Innovation Fund almost every year, you will find Israel ranked in very high places. In the overall position, you will find Israel ranked somewhere in the spectrum around 19 or 20th places. But if you will try to find out the main element that's connected to innovation, which are mainly R&D, industrial R&D, easy to do businesses in the country, level of involvement between academia, and local ecosystem, you will always find Israel ranked in one of the first 3 places. The very recent report, which was published last year, 2019, actually ranked Israel in terms of R&D involvement in the 3rd place. And as I mentioned, you will always find Israel up there in the list, promoting several spirits of activities. Next slide, please. It's important to understand that the diversity of innovation here in this country, in this ecosystem, it's very important. You can easily find an entrepreneur who used to work for several years in the security sector and few years afterwards becoming to be a CEO of an Israeli medical device companies. You can easily find entrepreneurs who are dealing with agri-tech one day and few years afterwards are establishing a new company in the big data or IoT domains. The reason for this is that this is a small market. We don't have the market here in Israel. What we do have is an access to industries. Many of the situations and many of the, let's say, invention in Israel among young entrepreneurs and also senior entrepreneurs are trying to solve business problems, not necessarily market problems. So this is why you will see more of a B2B tech opportunities in this country rather than B2C tech, because the C is not existing here. And this is what we are trying to find when Israeli companies are going abroad to foreign markets such as Taiwan and other ASEAN markets. They are trying to find for the B, how the B can assist them to grow. And when they're looking for this kind of growth, they aren't necessarily looking for money or investment. They're mainly looking for scale-up opportunities. And this is a very interesting opportunity for Taiwanese corporate who would like to collaborate with Israeli companies, because many of the Taiwanese corporates are more of a platform, technological platform to establish collaboration. And this is actually what Israeli startups need. So this is why I think and I see that there is a broad room for collaboration between Israeli companies and Taiwanese companies in the region. Next slide, please. Many of the day-to-day inventions that you are all using with are actually started in Israel. If we put aside the cherry tomatoes, which you can see on the upper left side of the screen, which we have a very large debate with Latin America countries, who was the first one to invented it, all the others inventions are actually started in Israel. The pioneers of the Israeli innovation came actually from the agriculture spectrum. A company called Netafim presented back in the 70s and 80s the drip irrigation system, which actually is being used today in the vast majority of agriculture fields in the world. The USB, which actually an entrepreneur called Dov Moran in Israel invented the patent to connect foreign object with a computer, which later became to be the USB. But actually, the initial invention and the initial patent actually started there. And you can see also several others inventions here in this slide. The very recent invention actually produced by a company called Mobileye. This is an technology automotive company. They provided a very interesting and sophisticated sensor be equipped in every vehicle and inform the vehicle of every foreign object along this drive. This is a big deal. The Intel bought them very recently for a very big amount of money, as you will see in a minute. Next slide, please. It's important to say that even though this is per capita a very small market, even in absolute numbers, this market attracts a lot of investment from all over the world. You can see here in this slide that Israel attracts about $6 billion for VC investment. So in per capita, this is a very high position, but not in per capita perceptions. This is a very high number because you can see here that Israel attracts even more money than Canada, and also very close to India. And again, this is a population of less than 9 million people overall. Next slide, please. This is a kind of a map. This is not an exclusive, inclusive map. This is a partial map. We can demonstrate to you the local and the foreign investors who are dealing with this ecosystem. The left side of the screen are all the local investors. The right side are all the foreign. In the middle, you can find all the corporate VCs as well as strategic investors. And in the bottom, you can find several governmental players and investment entities. Now, it's very misleading, but actually 85% of the money who is invested here in this country coming from the foreign side, on the right side of your slide. And this is a very strong signal. This place attracts a lot of foreign money and a lot of foreign investment, and many multinationals, investors, government, and businessmen are looking at the Israeli ecosystem as a room for growth. They are here in order to find the next growth engine of their entity. Very recently, we developed a kind of a very interesting report together with PwC Israel, where we actually interviewed more than 150 multinationals who are here in this country. We asked them several concrete questions such as, when do you see return of investment of your presence here? And how come you are here for so many years? Many of them said very, let's say, intuitive answers, such as we are here for the talent, we are here for the opportunity. But many of them said also very interesting insights, such as we are here in order to be in front of our competitors. We know that our competitors are in this ecosystem, so we need to be here as well. And B, this is the only place where you can see quick return of investment of any kind while you are collaborating with startups. Many of those multinationals who were interviewed in this report reported back that they see after 2 years drastic return of investment back to their business unit, which are all results from a collaboration with Israeli companies. And this is also a very strong signal. Next slide, please. So in a way, the tree that we are all trying to feed and support is the big amount of startups who are here in this country, more than 6,000. Actually, the concrete number is 16,400 something. And the roots for these trees are all the elements that you see in the bottom of the slide, which are more than 150 venture capital, about 19 incubators, 81 accelerators, around 330 multinationals and R&D center, public universities, and also tech transfer offices. The venture capital fund is clear. The incubators point is something which worth to emphasize a bit, because these are all governmental initiatives. This is one of the only places in the world where a foreign foreign MNC who would like to establish any kind of an innovation presence in the country can get up to 85% of their expenses paid by the Israeli government. The Israeli Innovation Authority is a governmental agency, and they are the one responsible to actually finance all of this presence of such multinationals, and they are encouraging them to come and try to communicate and collaborate with the Israeli ecosystem. We see many of them. This is initiatives which is still quite active and supportive. And by the way, we also see several collaboration between multinationals. For example, there is one interesting incubator in the north of Israel dealing with the digital health spectrum, which is a consortium of IBM, one of the biggest IT company, Medtronic, world-leading medical device company, Israeli hospital called Rambam Hospital, and Israeli VC called Pitango. So think about where in other places in the world you can find VC, hospital, and two global corporates from two different domains, completely different domains, are all teaming up and building consortium to find solutions for their challenges. So this is an important pillar of our activity. The multinationals presence, we will touch it in a minute. One important notion about the public universities and the tech transfer offices, if you're looking at Shanghai Index, we're actually trying to map universities around the globe. You will find only one Israeli university in the first 100, but you will find around, let's say, you'll find one university in the first 50 universities in the world, while all the other 8 are very close to the 50th place as well. This means that there is a very good education in Israel. Public universities in Israel are relatively cheaper in terms of cost than private ones. And this means that in Israel, you can get a very good education for a very fair price all over the country. Many of those universities and academic institutions are actually producing a kind of a tech transfer office. This is a kind of an entity within university, or rather hospital, who is actually taking the inventions and patents who are being developed inside the organization and trying to commercialize them. This is not something new. Any other or big famous university or hospital in the world has similar entity. But here in Israel, those entities are very important entities in the game of this ecosystem, because they are very active and they are very important for the day-to-day activities of innovation. If you recall the Mobileye patent, which I mentioned earlier, a few slides earlier, this is actually all started in an Israeli university, Hebrew University in Jerusalem in this case. So in a way, this is a kind of a slide which summarizes all the strengths of this ecosystem and how these very different players, the venture capitals, the incubators, accelerator, MNCs, universities, and entrepreneurs by themselves are all feeding up the ecosystem of more than 6,400 startups. And getting back to our mission, Startup Nation Central's mission as an organization, this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to support and strengthen the group of more than 6,000 startups and make sure that they will be and remain to be the growth engine of the Israeli economy. Next slide, please. If you're looking about the typical dream of an Israeli entrepreneur, it will be either one of the two following slides, which I would like to share with you. One is to go public. And Israel has more companies listed on the Nasdaq than any country besides USA and China. Again, small country of less than 9 million people are listing in this Nasdaq market more than 113 Israeli companies with a total market cap of more than 90 billion. This is huge. But what does it really mean? It means that due to the fact that this is a kind of a dream of every Israeli entrepreneur, he is willing to execute this dream from day one. Even when he sits together with his friend in the garage of his parents and they're trying to build the next technology will actually change the world, they're thinking about this dream. They're thinking about this day that they will go public in Nasdaq. And this means that they will take the best lawyer, they will take the best accountant, they will be ready with any GDPR, FDA, or other regulatory requirement in order to be ready for this dream. Nasdaq is one of them. By the way, we see very interesting shifts right now toward ASEAN capital markets, if it is Singapore, Hong Kong, and others, where Israeli entrepreneurs are trying to attract finance from those capital markets in order to finance their presence in the market. So this is why you will see more and more companies in the next several years looking for opportunities to be listed there. Next slide, please. The next dream is actually to wait and to find a big multinationals who will come and do majority investment and will buy the majority of the shares of the companies. And here you can see several recent deals. You can find there several Japanese companies, American companies, Latin American companies, and of course the list is big and growing every day. Every day in the news, there is a new news about a new multinationals or a new entity who is buying majority shares of an Israeli company. And this is what we call in Israel, in a way, the Israeli dream of an exit. The interesting fact here is actually not the size of the deal, is what is the methodology we is serving those multinationals by buying or purchasing these companies. And here we see something which is very common, because many of them, of those multinationals who are buying the companies and the technologies, are not only using the assets of the companies, if it is a product, if it is a software, or if it is a market, but they are all using the Israeli presence of the purchased entity to be their R&D center in the world. And by the way, the most interesting example in this slide is actually the smallest balloon, which you can see here in green, in the right side, a $150 million deal. Facebook bought Onevo several years ago and converted them to be their R&D center in the country. When they bought them, Onevo had something like 30 employees, not more than that. Today, the R&D center of Facebook in Israel has more than 350 engineers, and this is considered to be one of the key leading R&D centers of Facebook in the world. There is a very interesting joke by the CTO of Facebook saying that every time he has a challenge and he's sending this technological challenge to Facebook R&D centers all over the world, quite often he received an answer back saying, okay, this was the problem, this is how we think you can solve it. But every time he's sending this technological challenge to the R&D center in Israel, he received a very interesting answer back saying, you were wrong, this is not the problem, we think that this is the problem, and this is the way we should solve it. So in a way, this kind of a small joke kind of replicate the special characteristic of the Israeli entrepreneur, which we will touch upon in a minute. Next slide, please. This is a very small example of very recent multinationals who are here. This example, by the way, is only relevant for IT companies and for IT platform companies. So you will see here many companies such as IBM, Apple, Variant, Microsoft, and so on and so forth. All of them are here. I mentioned earlier why we think that all of them are here. And this is also a very interesting call for action for Taiwanese companies also to come and collaborate with this ecosystem. Because in a way, the similarities here are quite big. Many of the biggest Taiwanese corporates, in a way, similar to many other multinationals, as we can see here, in terms of technological platforms. The biggest example here that we can actually demonstrate is Intel. Intel are here for the last almost 30 years. And today, about 20% of the total income of Intel, the global income of Intel, is actually originated from an Israeli IP. We aren't producing here many of Intel's products, but we do responsible for the development and the production of many of Intel's products worldwide. This is typical for this kind of industry, but if you look at their industries as well, such as pharmaceuticals, medical devices as well, the picture that you will receive will be quite similar. If we are taking the pharmaceutical industry, company like Merck, one of the biggest producers for pharma in the world, also report back similar percentages of Israeli presence in their sales of around 20%. And many of them are quite active here, and again, cross industries in several domains, and they are all here to engage with entrepreneurs, to be in touch with the ecosystem, to learn what is going on, and to find potential room for collaboration. One important notion to emphasize here is that traditionally, many of them started their presence here in the country as an R&D based kind of a country, meaning they bought the building, they recruited many engineers, and they will start to invest heavily in developing new things here. What we see in recent years is a very interesting shift. Many of those multinationals aren't choosing the R&D center as their usual suspect for integration with the market, but many of them are choosing open innovation platforms, which are more lean in terms of expenses and are more light in terms of attention. And those open innovation platforms are all giving them the opportunity to engage as much as they can with the ecosystem, but on the other hand, not to invest heavily in this operation. And this is something which we as an organization are also trying to support as much as we can. Next slide, please. Just to summarize what you have seen up until now, and this is again, I think, a very strong place to emphasize again, call for action and collaboration with Taiwanese companies and other ASEAN companies as well. What Israeli companies need is mainly a room for scale-up. They are starting the whole journey in Israel from identifying the need, find the solution, do the testing here in several beta sites or academia. But what is missing for them is the scale-up, is the opportunity to take their development and actually to prove that this is a good technology with solving a severe problem in several kinds of industries. And this is why many Israeli companies are very eager to establish any kind of joint ventures in ASEAN countries and to expand their market. This is what brings them value back. If you recall one of the two dreams which I've mentioned of many Israeli entrepreneurs, the first one was actually to find an IPO structure. The second one was to find a kind of an M&A deal. They need to bring value for those kind of dreams, and how they can bring value for those kind of dreams by expanding their technology for other markets. Next slide, please. We, as an organization, what we are trying to do is actually to strengthen this group of companies, as I mentioned. We have one interesting vehicle of collaboration, which is actually an online platform, free of charge platform. We call this platform the Finder. What we are trying to do with this platform is actually to demonstrate all those 6,400 plus companies. You can find in this platform several crucial information on each company, what a company is producing, who are the investors, what is the business model, who are the team, And you can also find there several crucial and important information about hubs, multinationals, academia, and other patents. This is today the most advanced window for exposure to Israeli companies. We have about 3 million unique users per year for this platform. And about 70% of those unique visitors are coming from abroad. Again, this is a strong signal to demonstrate that this is an important exposure instrument today in the country. Next slide, please. So when you're trying to analyze what was the main, let's say, reasons who brought Israel for this specific situation, quite often we, S&C, are recognizing three main effects. Next slide, please. The three main effects that we have mentioned are what you can see here in this slide. The first one is the fact that we are a country of immigrants. There are more than 70 nationalities here in this country. My family, for example, my father came to Israel from Morocco when he was 8 years old. My mother, she was born in Israel, but her family came from Turkey. And if you will ask many of the Israelis that you are engaging with and in discussion with, they will tell you that their families came from other places all over the world. They all came here around the same time, facing the same challenges. But one challenge was very crucial for them to success, which was the language. None of them used to speak the same language. And try to put yourself in this situation when you are trying to solve crucial survival challenges such as water, health, security, and you have many other people around you, but none of them speaks the same language. This is where actually the roots of entrepreneurships started to grow. The other effect is actually governmental support. There is a huge and massive governmental support here in Israel, started by the Israeli Innovation Authority, to actually strengthen and support innovation of any stage, if it is a very early stage and if it is a broad company with broad idea. And another important pillar or an ingredient for this ecosystem is actually the Israeli military. The Israeli military, in a way, is a kind of a factory for talents. We actually provide to the Israeli ecosystem every year new batch of entrepreneurs, a new batch of people. Every boy and every girl in Israel are requested to go to the military when they are reaching the age of 18. Boys are serving a bit less than 3 years, and girls are serving a bit less than 2 years. But the common mechanism for all of them is that they are being exposed to a very delicate situation, very dangerous situation, very challenging situations. And these all are starting to run many circles in their brain to find solutions for those challenges. And those challenges, few of them are being interpreted afterward for innovation in the ecosystem and in the private market. Next slide, please. And one important pillar of our activity is actually, of the Israeli entrepreneur, is actually the fact that the Israeli characteristic of, the typical characteristic of the Israeli entrepreneur are he is a risk-taking person, an independent person who is trying to find solutions by himself or by herself for global challenges, actually. Chutzpah is a secret sauce that we have. This is a word came from Yiddish, and the meaning of this word is actually being rude in a good manner. I always interpreted chutzpah as a young entrepreneur who is sitting with the head of Microsoft activities in Israel and trying to prove him wrong for his direction and offer a solution by himself who will be able to actually solve Microsoft's problem. The funniest part is this is actually succeed. I mean, in the end of the day, many of those young entrepreneurs, the chutzpah guys, are actually trying to prove right many of the CEOs of those multinationals. And this is part of the secret sauce that again, we have. It is very okay to fail here. In Israel, unlike in many other territories or geographies in the world where failure is a bad sign, in Israel, in the contrary, failure is a good skill. Many VCs that you will try to interview, they will all tell you that once you fail, you know how not to fail again. and this is the kind of person that they would like to invest in. And the other practical, let's say, message of many of the Israeli entrepreneurs is that they are very in practice. They are very straight to the point and quickly would like to go or no go for the deal. There are several cultures who see this as something which is a bit intimidating and rude, but this is us for good and for bad. At least for now, it goes quite well. Next slide, please. So in general, this is the presentation that I have. I try to summarize many of the key elements of this very interesting ecosystem. I can just summarize by saying that right now, due to the COVID-19 situation, we are all facing several challenging activities, and we're trying to bring as much as multinationals as we can digitally to discuss with Israeli companies and Israeli entrepreneurs. This is what I'm responsible here in this in our organization, and together with Taitra, we will be more than happy to expose as much as we can Israeli entrepreneurship to any Taiwanese company who would like to explore such collaboration. It was an honor for me to speak with you today, and I wish you the best of luck and success, and hope to see you soon in Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Elimelech. 提醒大家，8、9月份每周四下午3点，贸协将办理一系列的疫后市场学线上研讨会，主题包含了5G、再生能源、智慧城市等等的内容相当的精彩，不容错过。欢迎大家一定要锁定外贸协会 YouTube 频道。接着，让我们欢迎 Pitango 策略伙伴主管 Ms. Ayelet Tako 为我们介绍以色列优势领域。Welcome, Ms. Tako.
And thank you, Taitra, for inviting me for this session. I'm Ayelet Tako, the head of value creation and strategic partnerships at Pitango Ventures, the largest VC in Israel. And I'd like to take you through some of what makes Israel unique in terms of the deep technologies that we see here and provide some examples for key sectors. I believe that there are a lot of joint opportunities between Israel and Taiwan that have still not materialized, and I hope to share with you some of these opportunities in this presentation. As you may have seen before, Israel is named the Startup Nation because we have a lot of startups and an ecosystem. We're actually very strong in many different sectors, and the reason for that is that Israel is very strong in technology and creating platforms, which allows us to sort of adapt to new trends and new technologies relatively quickly. Because Israel is not a big market, much like Taiwan, most of our startups are B2B. So most of our startups are aiming globally to enterprise and other businesses. You can also see that in the past few years, we're growing from what we call the startup nation to the scale-up nation. So we see many more growth companies, that is companies that are remaining private while growing. And you can see here that over the years, alongside the fact that the total funding is raised, we also see more funding towards the growth stages of the startups. And this is another manifestation of that. We can see more and more unicorns. Unicorns are startups or companies already that are valued at $1 billion. And the rising stars are those with above $100 million of sales. So we can see that this ecosystem is maturing and is scaling. I want to talk a little bit about Pitango and how we view the ecosystem and some of the areas that we focus on. So generally speaking, Pitango has been around for 27 years, operating 11 funds with $2.3 billion of assets under management. Over the years, we had many exits, many M&As, and 25 IPOs. Today, we have between 60 and 70 active portfolio companies. And you can see here some of the examples of the M&As and IPOs that we've experienced together with our startups. with our portfolio companies. We've seen before the fact that the Israeli startup ecosystem is maturing and scaling. So you can see here some of the unicorns and the rising stars that we actually have in our portfolio. And you can see that they're really across sectors in various industries. So today, Pitango operates with 3 different platforms. We have our growth fund, which invests in growth companies. We have our venture fund, which is the early stage fund investing in earlier stages companies. And we have a health tech fund dedicated to health tech and medical and other areas and other companies in this area. The way we operate is it's one partnership with 3 dedicated teams. So we have the growth fund team, we have the venture fund team, and we have the healthcare team. But we also have a lot of a full supporting system. So beyond the co-founders, Chemi Perez and Rami Kalish, we're very much involved with all of the funds. We also have on the right-hand side, the value creation team, which is a team that is dedicated to helping our portfolio grow, to creating new business opportunities, to supporting our portfolio companies with anything that they need, whether it's an HR issue or connecting to global corporates or marketing, legal aspects, anything on this side. On the bottom side, you can see that we have quite a few venture partners. These are partners that we have either according to geography or according to an expertise, which we use often to either reach these markets or get advice on these specific topics. As you can see here, this is the full landscape of the current active portfolio companies of Pitango. You can see that we invest across sectors, across verticals, across industries. So, and we do put a lot of emphasis on the technology and data processing and AI and IoT and others. I want to go now deeper into just a few sectors, just to demonstrate some of Israel's capabilities in these specific areas, which I believe are very strong and also could be a good fit and of interest to the Taiwan audience. So when you look at AI, artificial intelligence, Israel is very strong in deep tech and AI. And in fact, there are today actually over 1,000 companies working in the AI space. So this is obviously a horizontal sector. We're only second to US and China in terms of number of AI startups. And you can see here that AI does go across a lot of verticals. It can be in cybersecurity, in fraud prevention, in retail, and basically in any space we see AI coming in and really dominating the sector. And the reason for that in Israel is that it's basically historic, and it shares some of the aspects of what makes Israel the startup nation. But when you look at AI, we do see a lot of influence from the army. We do have the technological units in the military where people just get hands-on support working with AI and data science, and then they take that knowledge into the commercial or to the civilian space and create their new startups or new ideas, just utilizing this experience. We have an ecosystem that really supports that. We have a lot of multinationals and research centers and the academia who put a lot of emphasis on that. And there's a lot of research done in the AI space in general, practically in every university in Israel, which is also a great contributor. And of course, we have the government who understands that innovation in general is a growth engine for Israel, and also invest in that, whether it's right programs or funding. Just to look at this snapshot, this is a snapshot of the top 100 AI companies by CB Insights, and we can see that 12 out of the 100 companies are actually Israeli ones. So this is quite astonishing, just thinking about the size of Israel. Another way to see how Israel is strong in AI or machine learning is just by looking at recent M&As, recent acquisitions by global multinationals of Israeli companies. And I think you can probably recognize Mobileye and Datorama and Dynamic Yield. All of these are, quite large acquisitions in this space. And I think that says a lot about the maturity of this space in Israel. And speaking of multinationals, you can see all of these multinationals who operate an R&D center focused on AI applications in Israel. And again, you can see it's across sectors, across geographies. So that just sums up the AI. Moving on to health tech in Israel. So in the health tech, we also have probably more than 1,000 companies, I'd say, and they vary from digital health to pharmaceuticals, to medical devices. So basically, it's sort of health tech becomes sort of a mini or a microcosmos of its own in Israel with its own ecosystem, which is really what makes Israel strong in the healthcare space is, again, a lot of supporting pillars, being the healthcare system, which has accumulated data of 25 years that startups are using to test or to verify their technologies and to create new ideas and solutions. We have the HMO platforms here, which is much more accessible. We're just very strong technologically, and we have the talent and the infrastructure to support the healthcare system, the healthcare or the health tech companies grow and really find great opportunities. This is another slide to show the multinationals who operate here in these spaces. So you can see both pharma companies and tech companies, which do not have, health is not their core strategy or capability, but they are looking into the space mainly in the digital space, in the digital health spaces. But we definitely see more and more tech companies, multinationals, coming here to operate a lot of research and develop solutions in that space of the health tech. Moving on to cybersecurity, which is yet another very, very, very strong area in Israel. We have more than 400 startups in the cybersecurity space. I think cybersecurity space, everybody knows that we need safety and we need to protect our assets. I think today, even more than ever, just because of the digital transformation and today with COVID-19, working remotely requires a lot of resources and platforms that we might have not used before, but they're also making enterprises and organizations a bit more vulnerable. So cybersecurity is becoming more and more and more central, a strong focus and definitely a strong space in Israel. In Israel, again, it's an historical situation where Israel is just positioned in a sort of complex geopolitical ecosystem and space. From very early on of the Israeli days, we had to protect ourselves, and cybersecurity was definitely one of the things that was probably developed very early on in our days and just became more and more and more sophisticated. The last sector I'd like to talk about is what used to be mobility and today is turning more into the smart city. Again, also here we have more than 200 startups operating in this space. When you think about mobility startups, just imagine that there are more than 200 startups in this space in Israel, but there isn't even one car manufacturer in Israel. This is, I guess, a true testimonial to the strength of Israel in technology, even though the market is not here. And I think today we're not just talking about mobility in terms of autonomous cars and self-driving, you can see in the picture, but it's actually much larger than that. We're talking about smart cities, smart cars, and relating much more to the general infrastructure. So I think that's another very interesting and relevant space for Taiwan. I think that's pretty much, when you look at the Israel mobility landscape again, so you can see it in every space. This is the landscape, just to give you a snapshot. And before I end this presentation, I would like to share with you just a little bit about how we at Pitango work with multinationals to help them sort of soften their landing in Israel. So based on a research done by PwC and Startup Nation Central about a year ago, we identified 3 different identities of multinationals who come to Israel to tap into the Israeli innovation ecosystem. And some of them are mainly focused on R&D, some are mainly focused on investment, and some are mainly focused on partnerships. And what we've seen over the years is that historically, multinationals used to come and either acquire or open their own R&D center, which requires a lot of resources and talent. And what we see today is a big shift toward partnerships. So this means that most multinationals understand that they don't need to spend a lot of money and resources on working with Israeli innovation. They can simply collaborate with startups using a smaller team on the ground, just enhancing their corporate capabilities and bringing innovation into the enterprise. And the way we look at it at Pitango is we call it the golden triangle. So we have Pitango, which is the VC. We have the Israeli startups, which is our portfolio companies and other companies as well. And we have our strategic partners, which are basically global corporations. And every triangle, every side of this triangle has a lot of opportunities and mutual benefits for collaboration. And I want to focus today on the collaboration between Pitango and the strategic partners, which are the global corporations. I think what we do mutually is, we share our deal flow. So we share the companies that we see, providing also market insights and trends. We provide investment and co-investment opportunities and generally access to the Israeli startup ecosystem. We're obviously open to collaborating with our portfolio companies. We're happy to host you when you come to visit Israel. And really the way we have a lot of tools to engage with multinationals, as you can see here, be it from visits whenever the skies are open again. But today we do a lot of Zoom sessions and webinars and community events. And we're very happy to facilitate and partner with a lot of global corporations to facilitate that. I think that ends my presentation for you today. I hoped I was able to shed some light on the real and concrete opportunities that Taiwanese companies can find in Israel. And of course, there are many others. This is just a sample and the tip of the iceberg. And I hope to see you soon and collaborate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tako. 再次提醒大家，8、9月份每周四下午3点，外贸协会将办理一系列的疫后市场学线上研讨会。我们将邀请国际知名的专家学者来为各位分享最新的观点以及商机，请大家千万不要错过，锁定贸协 YouTube 频道。最后，让我们欢迎 Hailo 商务开发副总经理 Mr. Liran Bar 为我们介绍人工智慧的实际应用。Welcome, Mr. Bar.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for hosting us. I'm the VP of Business Development here at Hailo. So today I'm going to dedicate around 20 minutes to explain and to share with you what Hailo is doing and how different it is from the other available solution in the market. Next slide. So some words about Hailo. Hailo was established in 2017. We are based in Israel, and our first office outside of Israel is actually in Japan. We have also a lot of activities in Taiwan, and I hope that the next office will be in Taiwan. We have around 100 employees here in Tel Aviv, mostly is R&D. You can see here the list of the companies at the bottom that our team came from. A lot of experience in hardware and also software from many distinguished companies. We have a lot of patents on our technology, and we will talk about it. And also our product won several prizes. You can see on the right side, we have the CS Innovation Award, Gartner Cool Vendor for 2020. And basically our mission was to develop the most efficient deep learning processor for edge devices. So we are not a general purpose processor, and we are not doing training. We are focused on the edge devices where there are a lot of challenges, and we will talk about it. Next slide, please. As we see in the past few years, we see the transition from doing the actual intelligence from moving from the cloud to the edge devices. On the cloud, as many companies are doing, there are a lot of issues. The low latency, for example, if your device, the edge device is require critical mission task, you cannot rely on the latency. Also, there is a power consumption issue. On the cloud, you are paying per hour, and sometimes you want to do that on the edge devices. On the edge device, you have power constraints, for example. Privacy is a very important aspect. If you would like to have the processing done on the edge devices and not to send the data to the cloud. Europe, for example, has the GDPR. So privacy is very important things, and you would like to do the processing on the edge devices. And also the reliability. So overall, transition from the cloud to the edge device. Next slide, please. So deep learning is at the edge is all over. And some of the examples that you see here is pedestrian detection, for example, collision avoidance in ADAS application, passenger control to allocate missing child and so on, and also quality inspection in factories. And this webinar is talking about the COVID-19 situation. Well, this is a great opportunity for companies such as Hailo to adopt the technology that is based on AI. And some of the examples that you see here at the bottom are, for example, smart retail. The fact that you're able to buy a glossary without any cashier. Medical robots, so the doctor can still check the patient and give them the necessary things or medicine that they need, or the food, as you can see in this picture, without actual face-to-face contact. Also, the last mile delivery, for example. Many people now under COVID-19 are ordering food or glossaries or those things. So you don't need to go outside, and you have this kind of vehicles that are doing the last mileage and give you the glossary. Also, factories. Factories today, some of them were damaged. Their produce went very slow because of the COVID-19. So the motivation is to go and to do the autonomous or automatic factories, for example. And there are many applications for that one. Obviously, we can't cover all of them here. Next slide, please. So let's see what Hailo is doing. The first product that we have is called a Hailo 8. Hailo 8, as we mentioned, is an AI processor for edge devices. And it is quite unique in this area. For example, and we always compare ourselves to available solution that you can put on the table and that people can integrate. One of the things is that the available solution out there include 2 to 4 TOPS, tera operation. This is actually the horsepower. Well, a single device like Hailo 8 is around 26 tera operation. This is quite a lot to do many applications, and this is in 8-bit. Many of the ASIC or the SoC that you are familiar require external memory. In our case, the architecture, the innovation comes from the architecture, and one of the things that we have is that we don't require external memory. Yes, we do not need external memory. Everything, all the network sits inside the chip itself, from the beginning to the end. And we will talk about it. Sometimes, when you look at the processing on the cloud, you do care about the processing, how many frame per second you're able to do. And you less care about the power consumption. So if you are doing 50,000 images per second in 100 watt, well, it's okay. But on the edge devices, 100 watt is a no-go. On the edge device, we do care about the throughput, but we do care about the power consumption. Therefore, we have a parameter that is called the power efficiency. How many tera operation you're able to do in a single watt. And in the case of Hailo, we are able to do around 3 TOPS per watt across many applications. And this is a measured parameter, not theoretical. While other solutions are limited up to 0.3 tera operation per watt. So it's a very high efficiency across multiple applications. The use case of the Hailo 8 can be as a standalone or a coprocessor. In the case of coprocessor, the end customer can still leverage all the work that was done on the SoC and offload all the tasks related to neural network to the Hailo 8. This is the fastest time to market. Obviously, we are also providing a software, comprehensive software SDK, and we will talk about it later on. And this single device is also targeting automotive applications. Therefore, this device, the Hailo 8, will be automotive certified. Next slide, please. Now, let's compare ourselves to the available solution. We mentioned that the Hailo 8 can go to automotive. One of the available solutions is the NVIDIA Xavier, which can do a lot of things, include CPU, GPU, and also hardware accelerator for neural network. It's called NVDLA. Now, as you can see on the left image, you can see the CPU, GPU, the NVIDIA, but you see all the 8 complementary memories surrounded in red. In addition, you need all the PCB as a module. And also on top of that, you have the heatsink. So overall, you have here a module that is very expensive, but let's leave it aside at the moment. Let's compare the area. On the left side, we see the Xavier. Xavier, by the way, is around 30 TOPS, while Hailo 8 is 26 tera operation. On the Hailo 8, we mentioned that there is no external memory. Therefore, the image that you see on the left side is with the correct aspect ratio. You can see here that the difference from an area point of view, it's around X15 better on the area efficiency. Now, obviously, we are not replacing NVIDIA. If you need in your system a very strong host or GPU, then it's fine. But you don't need to take the high-end SoC. Now, let's compare the neural network task. Usually, I like to give an example that with the Swiss knife. Swiss knife can do a lot of things, right? But when you want to cook a meal, you will take a kitchen knife, right, for a specific task. The same things go with a neural network-based application. If you have a heavy lifting task that rely on a neural network, why not to take a dedicated processor for edge devices, run deep learning? And this is what Hailo provides. So here on the right side, you see one of the examples, the common example in the market. This is ResNet 50 classification. You can see at the bottom line that we are comparing same resolution, 8-bit, bit size 1, in the same FPS, although Hailo 8 is able to do much more frame per second. But for the sake of this comparison, we are comparing apple to apple. Now, in the case of NVIDIA Xavier, you can see that this specific task is done while consuming 32 watts, while the Hailo 8 is only 1.7. And remember the power efficiency that we talked. Well, for this specific task, the Xavier is only 0.14 tops per watt. The Hailo 8 is 2.8 tops per watt. This is X20 better on the power efficiency. So overall, you get better efficiency on the area and better efficiency on the power efficiency. Next slide, please. Now, let's compare other tasks and show you the versatility of the Hailo 8 solution. Some of the available solutions out there in the market are tailored for a specific task. But the world of deep learning algorithm is changing so quickly that you need to adopt a technology that can cope with the evolving changes in this area. So what you see here in this slide is a lot of information, and we'll go step by step. On the x-axis, you can actually see 3 different tasks. One is the classification that we talked earlier. This is the ResNet 50. And you can see IFPS with a high power efficiency. The y-axis is the power efficiency. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, I have a system that is able to do smaller resolution like 224 by 224, but with 600 and something FPS. Why do I need this? My sensor is outputting only 30 or 60 FPS. Why do I need this one? So, yes, you are correct. But per the use case, you can utilize the Hailo 8 per the use case that you have. For example, one of the options is to have multiple streams of a lower resolution with a single Hailo device, 10, 20 cameras, and still do it with a single Hailo device. And you will see a demonstration later on with the links that I will provide to you. The other alternative is to go to a higher resolution processing. Remember, you have HD or Full HD camera, but the available solution today are not able to run the video analytics on the full resolution. They have to do the downscale input resolution in order to meet real time. In the case of Hailo, we are able to run it on the full scale. So here we have an example at the center. It's called detection at 720. You can see that we are able to run it at 40 FPS while we have a very high power efficiency. As we go to full HD segmentation, we are able to run it at 40 FPS real time and still high power efficiency. All the network that you see here are the original network. They are not pruned. It means we are not doing the compression. It's the original network. And this is very important to compare apple to apple in terms of hardware. So what you see here, by the way, and you can see here a comparison to NVIDIA and also to Google Edge TPU, and we have also comparison to Mirrored X, for example. All of them are based on the same traditional architecture. Hailo is based on a different architecture, and we'll explain it in the next slide. But the bottom line, the message of this slide is that actually the Hailo 8 is very, very versatile for many, many applications. So if now you design your product and it will be in the market 1 year from now or more, then we can assure you that it will be able to cope with the evolving changes in the deep learning algorithm. Next slide, please. Once you will get this slide, you will be able to go into all these links, including the CES 2020, and to see the actual demonstrations. So we will not spend any time on that one. Next slide. The Hailo 8 can cope with it's targeting different markets. One of them is the automotive, as we mentioned, can be autonomous when it happens, and also ADAS, front-facing cameras, backward, surrounded, and so on. Our next market is actually the smart cities, to do the video analytic for safer cities, smart home, and also Industry 4.0, for example. So you need here, as we mentioned, the flexibility to do for different markets, and also scalability. For example, automotive, there are two approaches. One is to put the Hailo 8 next to the camera. So 26 tera operation is good enough for this kind of task. But as you move on to the autonomous driving L3, L4, 5, then you need more than 26 tera operation. So there will be in the autonomous driving in level 5, for example, people are talking about 30 sensors. So in order to cope with that one, you have to offload the task from the central processing unit to a dedicated neural network device like the Hailo. But in this case, you need around 100 TOPS. How do you achieve it? So with Hailo 8 is very, very easy. Why? Because you are able to cascade several Hailo 8 like a Lego with the chip-to-chip connectors. And for example, to achieve the 100 TOPS, you are able to connect 4 Hailo 8. There is no limitation actually on that one. So imagine 4 Hailo 8 without any external memory. The footprint of that one is quite small compared to other solutions that you need the heatsink, you need also the memory, so it's becoming a very large solution. So flexibility and scalability. Let's move to the next slide. During March this year, we actually completed round B from a financial point of view. Obviously, with the existing investors, we have this time two strategic investors. One of them is NSC Corporation from Japan that actually can read what they are saying about Hailo, about the technology, about the team, which is very important. And this is targeting all kind of security application, and they will integrate Hailo solution into their product. The second strategic investor is ABB. They are one of the largest industrial and also robotic companies. And also them evaluated our technology and are very eager to integrate Hailo solution to their product. Next slide. Well, this webinar is for Taiwanese companies. So in Taiwan, in the past year and a half, we did a lot of work. We cannot disclose all the activities that we are doing, but we are happy to share with you the latest collaboration that we have with Foxconn and also with the Japan company Socionex. As you can see on the left side, this partnership actually brings Socionex state-of-the-art host with a very good ISP. And this is one of the best hosts that we worked with. And inside there is also the Hailo 8. So this device that you see on the left side is called the Boxy Edge. This is the brand name by Foxconn. Foxconn is the integrator in this case, and they own this Boxy Edge. Basically, what is this Boxy Edge? If, for example, we gave an example of smart retail store, where you have, for example, Amazon Go store, include 300 cameras. So instead of putting for every device a camera, a processing, AI processor, with this kind of device, you are able to connect around 20 cameras, as we mentioned earlier, and to process them in a single Hailo device. So this is the best cost-effective solution that you can have. This can go to smart cities, this can go to factories, this can go to other devices, industry 4.0 and other use cases. So you saw the strategic investor that we have, also the collaboration that we have with Foxconn and Socionext, really gives a lot of credibility of companies that already evaluate Hailo technology. And we hope to share with you more information in the future once it will become public. So now one of the questions that you may ask, we understand the benefit that we are able to give, that Hailo is able to provide us in different markets. But how you are able to achieve this kind of performance? Next slide. So when we are looking at a neural network task, without going into too much detail because we don't have much time here, we can leverage a lot of the characterization of neural network. For example, there is a lot of information going from one layer to another. So every time that you go outside of the chip, you pay to external memory, you pay with the power and latency. And obviously, unlike other solution, accelerator, hardware accelerator, that they have a fixed pipeline, which is configurable, but still, fixed pipeline. You have activation, and you have obviously the convolution, activation, pooling, and so on. But if the topology of the neural network changes, then the efficiency of this hardware accelerator becomes lower. In the case of Hailo, what you see here in this slide is actually when we open the neural network, you see this kind of unique matrix. This matrix includes three pillars. One is the compute element, one is the memory, and one is the control. As you can see, there is no one block of memory or control. Everything is distributed in a very efficient way inside the chip itself. And it's very, very flexible. Next slide. So from a user point of view, how this work is done. I mean, on one hand, we have the neural network that was trained on a 32-bit. And on the other hand, you have device like Hailo 8 on the embedded. Now, we provide a tool, the SDK that we mentioned earlier, that is able to analyze the neural network in offline. For example, you see here an application that utilizes, for example, a neural network with 8 layers. In offline, for each one of those layers, you can see that we are creating the resource graph in the center. For every layer, we ask ourselves, what are the resources that are needed out of those 3 pillars that we mentioned earlier that are needed in order to execute this layer. And then at the bottom, you can see actually the deployment of the network inside the core itself, in the NN core. So what you can see here is that, for example, layer 1 sits next to layer 2 and layer 3. We want everything to be close to each other. Obviously, this is illustration. But the motivation is to have everything close to each other. So the neural network sits inside the chip from the beginning to the end, doesn't go outside. Different network will be mapped differently on the device. So as you can see here, the hardware is very, very flexible, and we can cope with any neural network that you will bring. It's not a hardware fixed pipeline. There are many, many benefits of that one that we cannot disclose at this stage, and we'll be happy to discuss with you face to face. Next slide. So my last slide here is actually to explain where we stand today. As of today, August 2020, we have the samples available already in the hands of dozens of customers from different market segments: automotive, tier 1, OEM, smart cities, industry 4.0, as you can see earlier, and so on and so on. Everyone, all the big companies that evaluate Hailo 8 were very, very impressed and they verify all the claims that we showed here on the slide. Some of them were able, all of them actually, were able to deploy their network and also to go to the next stage, which is a POC, proof of concept, connecting this one to their existing project. Now, we mentioned earlier that we raised during March around $60 million US. So we have around $19 million US by now. This will help us to go into the market, to go to production, which we expect second half of this year, and also obviously to develop our next generation of the Hailo product. So this was my last slide. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will be happy later on to get your question and answer that one. Later on, you will be able to see in the links that I provide you the demonstration, the real-time demonstration that we have. Obviously, every time we have a new one. And you're also welcome to visit Hailo website, hailo.ai. So thank you very much, Taitra, for inviting us to this webinar. Thank you to our friends here in Israel, and looking forward to talk with you again. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. 以色列以创新能力闻名全球，台湾则是 ICT 产业发展的重镇，台以双方合作潜力无穷。接下来，我们要欢迎特拉维夫台湾贸易暨创新中心杨树华主任为我们介绍外贸协会可以如何协助台湾厂商。有请杨主任。
谢谢各位参加我们中心规划的线上研讨会，我是杨树华 Emma， 我在贸协已经工作了大概20多年，目前外派在以色列特拉维夫。现在我就大概花3分钟的时间告诉各位，为什么我们中心是 Your Gateway to Israel。以色列呢是全球有名的新创之国，细心的你可能会留意到，在我们中心刚设立的时候，我们叫台湾 Trade Center Tel-Aviv， 跟一般的贸协驻外办事处一样。但是呢，现在我们的新名字叫台湾 Trade and Innovation Center Tel-Aviv， 也是呢贸协在全球目前唯一的一个TTIC 这样一个台湾 Trade and Innovation Center。那在办事处在2019年设立的时候，我们董事长用了一句话 ，James 说到了，以色列呢最长于创造0到1，那台湾呢最长于拓展1到无限 N 那所以我们跟其他办事处最大的不同就是，我们除了贸易推广之外呢，我们还帮忙台湾的厂商做 Scouting 以色列新创科技的这个工作。所以呢，如果你想借用以色列的新创科技来突破 COVID-19 的这种重围呢，特拉维夫台湾贸易及创新中心将会是你未来重要的合作伙伴。我们在取得你的个别需求之后呢，会评估它的可行性，然后再客制化的引导你到认识以色列相关的这个科技圈，最后呢再帮你安排1对1的这种贸易洽谈。那最重要的是，因为我们坐落在以色列呢，可以帮助您发展跟以色列业者的这种长期合作关系。目前呢，我们手上已经有几家那个台湾的大公司呢，已经与我们展开所谓的合作，那所谓的 Tech Scouting 的这个活动。那我们期待呢，你也能够加入。上面呢是我们的中心的电话、email， 还有我们的 LinkedIn 欢迎你各位呢可以写信来给我们，把你们的具体的需求告诉我们，让我们来帮助你跟以色列的新创科技连接。谢谢。
谢谢杨主任。未来厂商若有任何新创 Scouting 的需求，都可以与外贸协会联络。接下来进入到我们的 Q&A 时间，由于时间有限，所以我们会选择3个问题来进行回答。Okay, the first question is for Start-Up Nation Central. What is the important nature and ways of doing business in Israel? Mr. Elimelech, please.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for this question. I hope you can hear me well. In reply to your question, I think the most important item is to know the Israeli culture of doing businesses and how to do business between Israeli companies and ASEAN companies. There is something important in this connection which many of you should be aware is that Israeli companies and Israeli entrepreneurs are very straightforward. They would like to go straight to the point and try to see if there is an opportunity for a commercial deal, yes or no. They will prefer not to waste your time as a business owner as well as their time as a vendor or a company provider. And this is a very important element.
Thank you for your answering. Okay, for the second question is for Pitango. What are the major advantages of investing startups and early stage technologies? Ms. Tako, please.
Hi, and thank you for having us here today and joining this session. I think a lot of people, when you think about early stage company, you actually think about the risk, but there are actually a lot of opportunities when engaging with early stage companies. So, when we look as investors at early stage companies, you place most significance in the team and the technology, and not so much on the numbers. I think there are a lot of upsides and gains that you can get from working with startups more than you can lose. And one of the advantages of working with early stage is that you're really exposed to the breakthrough technologies at an early stage, and you can gain competitive advantage because of that. So you can be the first to market or the first one to use a breakthrough technology that can give you an advantage. I think the second thing to understand is that early stage companies are much more flexible and agile and fast. They're very receptive to feedback, so they would be happy to accommodate to your needs and do the modification needed so to serve you better. And the last thing, like has been described in the presentations today, is the fact that at the end of the day, that Israel is a very small market, and our companies in Israel, the startups, are looking for global partners and global partners. And this partnership starts at the very early stage of a design partner. So I think there's a lot of benefit, a mutual benefit. This is something that the Israeli companies are looking very, very much into, is partnerships at the global corporate overseas. And if you can be a partner to them, that would be a great benefit, I think, to both ends. And maybe the last point when talking about mitigating the risk of early stage companies is by doing collaborations with VCs. So then you're not exposed to a risk of investing in one startup, but you diversify your portfolio, and you can do it with a local partner that has a more hands-on understanding on the team and the technology, and they're doing the due diligence. So I think all in all, there's actually great advantages in working with early stage, much more than disadvantages.
Thank you for a detailed and clear explanation. For the third question is for Hailo. How can Hailo's AI chip create value for the digital health sector or manufacturing sector? Mr. Bar, please.
Thank you for the question, but before I will answer, I do want to take this opportunity and to thank Taitra Global Organization, and especially to our local Taitra Israeli branch, Emma Young and Shanik Freer. Thank you guys for all this great webinar. As for the question, as we know, a smart factory, as we know, is rapidly evolving. The pandemic has accelerated the need for smart factories to prioritize better automation through AI-powered sensors like Hailo technology. Specifically, Hailo technology or Hailo solution can process and analyze multiple stream camera input feed in real time, as I mentioned in my presentation. And everything is at the edge, not at the cloud. And this results reduction cost and high efficiency. Specifically for the COVID-19, if we'll take, for example, in light of the recent social distancing regulation that triggered by the global pandemic, if we have better automation through AI-powered sensor, with provide a practical solution for powering innovation in the automated delivery market, for example. Also, consider the personal robot, which seniors and other at-risk population that are relying on for companionship, for example, for entertainment and others, and even health monitoring. So edge processing definitely will offer distinguished advantages. For example, if a person experiences a health emergency, that information will be sent to the proper hub without placing any privacy issue or to get any exposure of this data.
Thank you so much for your reply. 再次感谢各位今天的参与，希望大家都能够有满满的收获。未来2个月，每周4下午3点，外贸协会将会办理一系列的疫后市场学线上研讨会。下周4将带大家由美国以及英国的再生能源发展来看未来的储能商机，内容相当精彩，大家千万不要错过。外贸协会疫后市场学线上研讨会，我们下周见，拜拜。